Hello and welcome. My name is Cheyenne McGowan. I'm a public ally with Community Legal Aid Society, where I work within the housing unit. And for Fair Housing Month, I'm hosting a series on the unasked questions around fair housing. For each week, I will be sitting with a new guest to help me answer some unasked questions. Today, I'm here with Ms. Romona Fullman. Tell us a little bit about your background, your job, and what inspires you to do this work.
So my name is Romona Fullman. I've been in state government for many years, have been responsible for the fair housing and the Division of Human and Civil Rights for, nearly 12 years. And my background is, I went to law school and bar in Pennsylvania. But what motivates me is just um, well, especially now that I have a grandson who's like 2 years, less than two, he's 19 months. And just that we um, need to make progress in having uh, justice and equity for all. And so when laws are passed, in my opinion, they should be enforced. And because they are passed, because they're critical to the nation and to the state. And so we take our job, we are small staff. The division we used to be the Division of Human Relations, and now we're Human and Civil Rights, which is a bigger tent. So we're looking not only at the laws that we are enforced by statute, but the other responsibilities that we have, like homelessness and affordable housing and equity and equality of opportunity. So, what motivates me is a brighter future. It's brighter now than it was uh, 50 years ago, but there's still work to be done.
Well, thank you so much. In the previous episode, we talked about the history of the Fair Housing Act and how it has helped to influence Delawareans. Today, we will be talking about spotting different types of housing discrimination that someone may experience. And unfortunately, in this world, we happen to see discrimination take many forms. What happens to be the most common or prevalent forms of discrimination in Delaware when it comes to housing, and what does it look like?
So, it's worth noting, and you probably know that when it comes to housing discrimination, there are 14 protected classes in the state of Delaware. There are seven in the nation. And so the first thing that it says is that the legislature has been mindful of the discriminatory practices that exist and have enhanced laws to cover more people so that more people can see themselves in the law and feel protected against being treated differently because of their membership in a protected class. And so we've seen a variety of complaints. We do receive a lot of complaints for reasonable accommodations, which are that have disabilities, both mental and physical. And so when it comes to things like service animals or comfort animals, and people have no pet policies, part of the complaint process is to let them know that if it's a service animal or a comfort animal or just what we call an assisted animal, it's not a pet. And so the pet policy doesn't apply. And so the accommodation is a change in the policies that exist. And so it's a process of educating the complainant and the respondent. And most of the times when we are engaged in a reasonable accommodation complaint, we try to conciliate most of our cases or complaints. And most of the time that the reasonable accommodations complaints will include something in the public interest, which means if we can have a conciliation agreement, training is a part of it because we want to work with respondents to ensure that they don't make the same mistake and that they change their policy for their tenants and for their staff so that everyone is compliant with the law. So reasonable accommodation complaints, we do receive a lot of them, most of them for physical disabilities, but some for mental disabilities as well, um, which involve a service animal. We've had discrimination complaints based on familial status. We have a complaint that I was just reviewing uh, this week where the complainant alleges that their family that has a small child, and that the the respondent or the housing provider uh, is is alleging that the child makes too much noise, and the complainant is saying that the child is whatever the age is too. And they do jump and they do walk. But, to say that you can't make any noise when you have a 2-year-old is discriminatory, based on the fact that there is a child. And so we get those kind of complaints. We've had complaints um, based on sex when it comes to sexual harassment. That is a real thing. And in fact, we uh, one of the complaints that we received recently that's being investigated, there's a video of a housing provider intimidating and sexually harassing one of their tenants. And, sometimes when it's tough to economic times, people survive, and the threat of losing housing is important, and it matters to individuals and to families. And so um, it has an impact, things like sexual harassment. So we had the gamut of complaints based on national origin, if there are accent issues, or um, things such as that. So probably almost each protective class we've had complaints filed on, and so most of the times they're combined. It may be race and color. It may be race, color, and religion. Uh, so um, there are just a number of things that where people feel that in a housing transaction, whether it's purchasing or renting, they feel that they've been treated differently. And we ask them how do they have a comparison, and sometimes they do. They know a neighbor that had a different experience, and they use that information. And so I think the teen protected classes that we have, we're using them, and the public is using them to seek justice and fairness, and eliminate and eradicate unlawful discrimination in housing.
Well, thank you so much. And when thinking about renting or getting to homeownership, many people realize that this is where housing discrimination may begin. So how does housing discrimination affect Delawareans and the home buying or renting process here in Delaware? And additionally, what challenges does it create in securing stable and equitable housing?
So that's a big question. Um, and there's a lot in it. One of the things that um, I would say has to do with neighborhoods and past practices of redlining and segregation. And that's relevant because everybody wants to live in thriving, growing communities. And the discrimination kind of says some people live in this neighborhood and some people live in that neighborhood. And sometimes, sellers or real estate agents could steer people to one neighborhood or another, depending upon their circumstances or their protected classes. So it may start there where people say, I want to live in this place. And their real estate agent may say, this might be better for you. I think that you would like this neighborhood better. And that's some could be a form of steering. But I think that uh, people want to live in communities where they have access to transportation and good schools, and where they may want a change of environment. They may have lived in the city and now want to live in the county. They may live in the county and want to live in the city where they have public transportation. And the state of Delaware, with a number of partners, including the Delaware State Housing Authority, has done an analysis of impediments to fair housing. So it is literally called an analysis of impediments, where people can't live where they want to live. and to identify what those impediments are. And so in the home buying and renting process, the question is how can we help people live in the neighborhoods where they want to live and not where their circumstances or their characteristics lead people to believe they want to live. So um, I'm not sure if I've specifically answered the question, but it is when people are looking to buy or rent that they kind of choose neighborhoods. People choose neighborhoods that accommodate their needs. So if they don't have transportation, they live in neighborhoods where there is transportation. If they have health challenges or their family members, they want to have access to the medical care that they need. And so those things they matter to everyone. And so, people want that kind of access and if they are denied the opportunity to live where they want to, the question becomes, are they being treated differently? And if they feel that someone showed them a house that was in a different neighborhood, they requested a neighborhood and they got another neighborhood, or when they are trying to rent and they want to live in a particular section of the neighborhood where they have access to a view of the pond, and they're said, well, we don't have any vacancies over there, but we have them, where you're facing a parking lot. And when they look around, like all their neighbors are of the same group, and the people that live near the pond are of a different group. And so because of their belonging to a group. And so people generally know when it feels like discrimination. It feels that they were treated differently. Sometimes it's the language, sometimes it's the options, but people have a sense. And, both my organization, CLASI, and other organizations can help them sort through it. So people may feel that they are just being discriminated against, and they really aren't. And people may feel like, I don't know how to describe it. They do have to allege that it's because of something. But people kind of know that they're being treated differently. I think the biggest challenge is if they need housing, and they may not. I hear a number of organizations, local and national, say that uh, not all instances of discrimination get reported because people they know that they were treated some kind of way, but right now they need to be out of their house by the end of the month, and it's the third week in the month. And so their focus is on housing and not necessarily fairness and equity. And that's an individual decision that they make. But I think that in the nation, we know that not all cases of discrimination get reported.
Yeah. And I was going to say, in the previous episode, Director Matt Heckles brought up the impediments, actually asked a question related to the impediments. And he also had very similar insight of, the economic problems that come associated with housing discrimination. And you bring a really good point of talking about, the challenges that someone's income has in being able to find secure and stable housing. So thank you so much. You did answer the question very, very nicely.
Thank you.
And going on to our final question, considering the state of local legal aid agencies that are still committed to ending housing discrimination, where do you recommend individuals experiencing or believed to be experiencing discrimination and to report their, complaints? I think we all know the answer is the Human Rights Commission.
So one of the things that I will say is that Delaware has, we used to have what was called a Fair Housing Task Force, and now we have a Fair Housing Collaborative. And in that collaborative, there are various groups that education is involved, health is involved, housing counselors are involved. And the like. So, ideally, we'd like anywhere where's a housing provider or someone that does housing counseling, that there's no wrong door, that somebody can get you to a complaint process, that they can say, contact the Division of and Civil Rights if you feel you've been discriminated against. If you're uncomfortable doing that, go to CLASI, because CLASI, we are an enforcement agency, and we educate and conciliate cases. Um, CLASI, the Community Legal Aid Society Incorporated, um, really advocates for persons who experience discrimination, and they file their complaint with us. But a housing counselor, or someone in the health and social services, or someone that's in transportation, that says, this nobody there's no public transportation to any of these communities. And so they may attend a public hearing and say, why isn't there access? We have to get to work, we have to get to school. And it could be a fair housing issue that this neighborhoods are excluded from opportunities. So they could go anywhere. We all serve the public interest. If you're in state government, or if you're a nonprofit, you serve the public. And so um, individuals or organizations can raise housing discrimination issues. If, to your question, they want to file a complaint, we are doing we have a website, Human and Civil Rights. If you Google it, you can file an online complaint. So we consider ourselves a 24/7 operation, because you can file a complaint any time of day. We do public education so that people can better understand and ask informally questions that they may have about an experience they've had, or the experience of a friend, so they have access to that. We make sure that if it's like a homeowners association, that we educate as part of any kind of agreement, people who may hear from um, uh, their fellow homeowners some concerns, and they can invite us in. Schools can invite us in and have a parent night to better understand, their rights of housing discrimination. So CLASI is a critical partner to us. I will say that, because as a team of lawyers, they bring complaints ready to be reviewed. And it's a quicker process, because they've done some of the work that we would do. But anybody can come in our door. We will take whatever they give us, and meet with them to better understand the circumstances, and to determine whether or not they meet the criteria for filing a complaint. But we rely heavily, and Delaware is a small state. We're the only fair housing enforcement agency. The authority is given to the Delaware Human and Civil Rights Commission, and the commission has delegated the investigations to the Division of Human and Civil Rights. And so the commission is doing outreach and education. So we're hoping to get better with letting people know what rights they have and the protections that are available. And so we do have, I mentioned to you off the record, that we have a public awareness committee that is going statewide to let them know, and to be available to answer any questions. CLASI is always a good partner with us. So is HOND, and the various jurisdictions, public housing authorities are part of the conversations that we have. And so, we're all of us that are involved in housing in any way, kind of work together or know each other, and will share information. And I think that that's what advances the state of Delaware in its creating an environment where people can live where they want to live, and live free of discrimination.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with me and helping me to answer some unasked questions. Please join us for the rest of this month as we discuss tenants' rights, advocacy, and more services related to housing discrimination. So once again, thank you, Ms. Romona Fullman. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. All right. See you next episode.
Right.
Bye.
Bye bye.